Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the last podcast of the year for 2021. My name's Angie, and this time I'm not bringing you a guest. I am just going to be here by myself. I told you last month I was going to try to do something a little bit of fun, which is we're going to have a little bit of a twist on this. We're kind of going to do the 12 months of Christmas through the entire year of 2021. And so welcome everybody to Angie's podcast called The Long Term. And really what we try to do is I try to just give you little snippets of content, not product driven, just kind of whatever's pressing in the industry, if you will, that's going on that month, or things that we're kind of seeing in the horizon. And I have to tell you, 2021 was a really busy year in the extended care planning space. And I want to kind of highlight some things for you that maybe you're already aware of, because I know Washington made a big splash, a little bit of controversy, a little bit of brought kind of some identity to extended care planning. But you may not be aware that there was actually a lot of stuff going on with long-term care insurance in 2021. And so I want to highlight for you, if you will, a little version of my 12 days of Christmas, calling it the 12 months of Christmas, because there's several things that went on every single month this year, soon to be called last year. And so I will give it to you this way. In the first month of Christmas, that takes us all the way back to January 2021. And I tell you, we were all so excited to step forward into a new year, to get out of 2020 and the pandemic. And so really we welcomed in a new year, and COVID was still around. The pandemic was still around, but here's what it brought forth: a lot of increased sales in that long-term care space. And that, quite frankly, has continued through all of this year. And so it was an exciting time, running lots of illustrations, having lots of conversations with consumers, because they wanted to make sure that they had a plan in place. And quite frankly, some folks just wanted long-term care insurance because they didn't want to end up in a nursing home. And that's, for whatever reason, we saw sales, whether it be on a hybrid, a linked benefit, or traditional long-term care, even short-term care, for those folks that aren't really insurable for maybe a long-term care product. So that's what the first month of Christmas brought to us in January of this year. So moving on to the second month of Christmas, into February, and here's where I'm going to kind of highlight some things that maybe you really weren't aware of. In the month of February, we actually had a House bill come to light somewhere around February 23rd. It was HR 1255, and it's titled the Living Donor Protection Act of 2021. May or may not have heard about this, and you may think to yourself right now, how in the world does that encompass anything long-term care facing? Well, I want to give you some highlights, right? So the bill actually would prohibit certain insurance companies from discriminating against and provide some protections for living organ donors. And you're still saying, Angie, come on, bring this relative to the long-term care space. Specifically, what it did was carriers were not allowed to deny, cancel, or impose any kind of conditions on policies for life insurance, disability, or long-term care insurance based on an individual's status as a living organ donor. So we saw that kind of come to the floor in 2021, in the second month of Christmas. And interesting. So moving into the third month of Christmas, that takes us into March, we had yet another bill that was introduced. This would have been House Bill 1976, introduced somewhere around March 17th. This one, you're going to be like, yeah, we've heard about it. The Medicare for All Act of 2021. But let's bring that into the long-term care space. And how was that relevant? So really, it was designed a little differently than what you're thinking of for Medicare for All, right? But among other requirements, there were some things. You had to be a U.S. resident and things of that nature. But what it did for that long-term care space was it was going to maintain health or to diagnose, treat, rehabilitate some health conditions, including hospital services, prescription drugs, mental health, substance abuse treatments, dental vision, and long-term care. So that actually did have a little bit of a component of that. I don't know if you're all familiar how far any of these went. I do have that information. You're always welcome to reach out to me. So then we move into our fourth month of Christmas, which brings us into the month of April of 2021. And that brought my peers in the industry the ILTCI conference, which is where all of my fellow nerds and I get together. If you will, it's kind of the NALBA of the long-term care space. So what we do is we get together and we're talking about all the things pressing in the long-term care space, what's new, what's old, what works, what doesn't work. We get together, we have a chance to meet with all the carrier reps, anybody launching any new products. Is there anything in the garage that anybody can sneak peek behind the curtain to see if they're working on anything? That's always very rejuvenating to get out there and talk amongst our peers. And I wanted to let you know that it's slated for 2022. We are going back in person again, and I will be attending that in 2022. So you can expect some highlights from that trade show and what I bring back from that space. And I'm sure Washington and a few other states will be all the buzz about what's going on there. So then what brings us into the fifth month of Christmas? Now we're into May, and believe it or not, there's yet another House bill that was put into, sent to the floor, House Bill 3321, somewhere around May 18th. And this one, let me double check. This one is called the Credit for Caring Act of 2021. And so let me kind of tell you what that brings into play with the extended care space. The bill would allow an eligible caregiver tax credit up to $5,000 for 30% of the cost of long-term care expenses that exceed $2,000 in a taxable year. And there's some more, it defines who an eligible caregiver is, and their income and things of that nature, whether you're incurring expenses because you're providing care for a spouse or another dependent relative with long-term care needs. So again, like I said, there's a lot of things going out there in the industry. I wanted to just highlight these for you. So now we're going to go into the month of June. June was a really big, busy month. So in the sixth month of Christmas, what brings to us is two, not one, but two bills that came into play in the month of June that were brought to the floor. And I want to read those to you. One of them of which was House Bill 4289. Now, this one you may have heard about. It's you know how much the government likes acronyms. So this was actually called the Well-Being Insurance for Seniors to Be at Home Act, lovingly actually called the WISH Act. That was brought in towards the very end of June, but let's kind of bring that into play as to how that affects the long-term care space. So this bill would actually, the way it was brought to the floor is it was going to amend the Title II of Social Security Act to provide long-term care insurance benefits. So there would be a benefit each month that would be determined by the Department of HHS in consultation with the Department of Labor for individuals that have attained some retirement age and they filed an application for long-term care benefits, or they have some kind of a continual serious functional disability that would entitle them to some long-term care benefits, each month beginning the first month that they've met that criteria. So that's one that we actually have heard quite a bit about. And we're kind of watching that. I don't know where, none of these are actually going too far. The other one that went in the month of June, not too far ahead of this one, was House Bill 4131. And this one was called the Better Care, Better Jobs Act. And so how it pertains to the industry is this bill would establish programs and provide funds for state Medicaid programs to help them improve home and community-based services such as home health care, personal care, some care management, rehabilitative services and such. It would also make permanent that the money follows the person rebalancing the demonstration program. It's a grant program through HCBS for long-term care and decrease the use of institutional care. So, I mean, it's impressive to me that there's a lot of talk going on. Of course, there's not a lot of action going on per se, but at least we're seeing some activity out there on that. So now let's move into the 7th month of Christmas. Brings us yet one more. And this one actually came in as a Senate bill, Senate Bill number 2415. This one is actually called the Long-Term Care Affordability Act, towards the middle of July. And this one actually allows for you to use some tax-exempt retirement plan distributions to pay for long-term care insurance. So specifically what it was going to do is exclude such distributions from your gross income to an insured person for up to $2,500 per individual per taxable year, to allow them to pull that out of their qualified accounts and then buy long-term care insurance without it being reported as income to the person using those funds. So that one was kind of interesting. Then as we move into the 8th month of Christmas, now we're into August. And what's fascinating, this is where Washington Cares Fund really kind of picked up some activity and some steam. And I want you to know that as that was kind of unfolding and playing out, and of course, I think more agents were in tune to what was going on there, more so than the actual residents of the state of Washington. I have a map. And if anybody wants to see this, not that it's relevant anymore, but starting in May, kind of how this played out at the carrier level, that we're offering long-term care solutions, whether that be a hybrid, a linked, anything with a true LTC rider on the back end of it, starting in May, and it ran all the way through September as those carriers slowly started dropping out of that space and suspending sales in the state of Washington. And I'll kind of go through that a little bit more. August also brought to us some long-term care partnership classes. Believe it or not, we do still have quite a few folks that want to continue selling long-term care insurance. So I'm still out there tromping through the Midwest, teaching these classes in person if anybody will have me out there. And I was landed in August in Nebraska to do that. And that was actually for a financial planning association. So that was a lot of fun. So now into the 9th month of Christmas. Now we're into September of this year, kind of starting to move towards that last quarter. I attended the Medicare Supplement Conference in Chicago. And you may say, well, what does that have to do with long-term care? We still have a lot of folks, consumers, with a lot of misconceptions around extended care planning and, the use of their tax dollars. And you all know this. I mean, this is something that you see, you hear from your consumers. And so it's interesting that as I start attending some of these different conferences, even at NAELBA, which has a tendency to be more life insurance facing, there was a good handful of long-term care carriers there, albeit most of them had life insurance with long-term care riders. There was still a presence there. And I'm starting to find that that's obviously more popular, but it's getting a little bit more traction where we're starting to see kind of those two worlds collide a little bit more. And more agents are going out there and getting certifications in order to do that. Also in the month of September, it took me out to Colorado, beautiful state. And we did another long-term care partnership class out there to do some certifications, get in front and get those folks certified for their next 2-3 years of renewal. So the 10th month of Christmas now brings us into October. And if any of you are in the Medicare space, you know how busy that last 54 days of that AEP, which is the annual enrollment election period, and everybody's consumed with Medicare. Well, what's interesting is that gives us an opportunity, albeit you have to stay within your scripts when you're selling Medicare, but that really is a wonderful opportunity to find out if there's anything that you can go back during the next year when you're out of your Medicare season to talk to those folks about some extended care planning. And this is where I want to digress, excuse me, just a little bit and talk about kind of what played out in Washington. If you're not familiar, Washington has actually kind of suspended. They're not going to implement the payroll tax in January as they originally opted to do so. They've had a lot of pushback from consumer groups, plenty of signatures on petitions and things of that nature. So they're looking at that, which brings me to pause for just a moment, because I'm working with two different legislative working groups, one for NAFA, one for NAHU, and we want to watch this very closely, because there's about 15 other states that are talking about this. Really, probably, California is the one that's got a task force, and they're actually in conversation. They've got an actuary on board, and they're having those meetings, I believe, on a monthly basis. But we do have a good handful of other states that kind of go across the nation having these types of conversations. And the concern is how do we do this right? How do we do this to make this collaborative with the state and private so that people are buying meaningful benefits? I think that's one of the things that we saw in Washington. We saw a lot of very small policies just for the opt-out purpose. And then consequently, we saw a tremendous amount of carriers suspend their sales. I mean, we started in May with, Lincoln Financial suspending their long-term care rider. And then we had commission changes where there was 2-year chargebacks and mandatory parameds, and then we saw minimum benefit structures because people were buying absolute minimums, which was a $50 a day, 2-year no inflation. So we started implementing some minimum benefit structures. Into June, we started seeing that issue age start to change with some of those carriers. And then June 17th, Mutual of Omaha suspended all sales. June 17th, also Thrivent suspended LTC sales. It just kind of keeps going on. We had carriers start to change. By the time we get down, the last carrier was Lincoln Financial, suspended their hybrid LTC sales September the 8th. And if you were in that space at all, you really saw that. So that was a concern, because all of a sudden we have consumers, not to mention the unintended consequence of the backlog. I mean, I had applications going in Kansas that couldn't get pushed out the door because of the backlog of applications that came in from Washington. So that's something that we want to be very cautious about for any futures, because the last thing we want to do is have our carriers not be able to have products, and obviously have those of you that maybe aren't writing in the state that's launching a platform not being able to get your business processed. So hopefully we'll continue constructive conversations. So moving into the 11th month of Christmas, now we're into November. We're very close to our current timeline. November is Long-Term Care Awareness Month. And I will tell you, I think it's very important, but I will tell you, I think it's lost its voice. I don't know if all of you feel that way. If you're entrenched in Medicare or the ACA health insurance, long-term care really has lost its voice in the month of November, because there's too much other stuff going on for you to give it a real presence and a run with that. So even though it's Long-Term Care Awareness Month, you see an awful lot of stuff being posted on social media, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook pages. I tend to tell you that it's really just all of us talking to ourselves. It's me posting, it's every other BGA out there posting. I just don't know if we're actually bringing long-term care awareness to the people that need to hear it, which is the end buyer, the consumer. So even though we'll always probably end up with Long-Term Care Awareness Month in the month of November, I encourage you, pick a different month, pick a month that you can, or if you're not in Medicare or health insurance, good for you, then you can still run a campaign through November, and hopefully that kind of kicks you off into a first quarter marketing campaign to bring those folks and have those conversations about extended care planning. Now we're into the month of December, the last month of Christmas, December. And I will tell you, it's time for all of us to take a breath. It's been 2 years of pandemic, 2 years of all of you doing an absolute fantastic job. kudos to you. I don't know if you've patted yourself on the back, but you deserve a high five and a pat on the back, because you all have done fantastic navigating through 2 years of unprecedented change. A lot of disruption in all product lines, whether it's life, annuity, disability, long-term care. There's been a lot of noise, a lot of disruption. All of you have had to find new ways of communicating with your consumers, and you've done an absolute fantastic job. So kudos to all of you. I just wanted to take a moment to wish all of you a very Merry Christmas, an incredible Happy New Year. I'm looking forward to 2022. It's going to bring in some wonderful opportunities for all of us, because you've all proven you can do it. So I want to say to all of you, relax, take a deep breath, enjoy the last few days of 2021. Be ready to ring in 2022. I look forward to podcast January 25th, going to bring to you kind of some different things. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of different things that can impact our folks when it comes to them planning for extended care. But to all of you, be happy, be healthy, be prosperous, and have a wonderful 2022. Thank you.